Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! The shoreline of California dazzled under the summer sun, an idyllic setting for Caden's reunion with his closest pals. Each step on the golden sand, warmed by the glowing rays, marked their journey to the meeting point, a sight that could only be described as a vibrant tapestry. Multicolored parasols and beach blankets mingled with the sunbathers' cheerful discourse, nature's symphony of crashing waves accompanying their harmonious chatter. Amidst this captivating scene, Caden, his presence commanding attention, stood out in vibrant attire, a striking contrast of red swim briefs and a crisp white sleeveless shirt that accentuated his lean, muscular build. His appearance, reminiscent of a Greek god with short, sun-kissed blonde locks and vivid blue eyes, turned heads, the corners of his mouth curled upward into a mischievous smirk.
"Listen up, mates! I have an epic proposal for this summer's mischief!"
Caden exclaimed, his energy palpable.
"Well, I say we do it, with a twist."
His friends leaned in, curiosity piqued. Ethan, a stocky redhead with freckles splashed across his nose, raised an eyebrow.
"What kind of twist are we talking about here, Cade?"
Caden's grin widened.
"A gender swap twist. We'll recreate the slow-motion beach run, but with the guys dressed as the female lifeguards and the girls as the male ones."
A moment of silence fell over the group before they erupted into laughter and excited chatter.
"That's brilliant!"
exclaimed Olivia, a petite brunette with a mischievous glint in her eye. She wore a navy blue bikini that contrasted beautifully with her sun-kissed skin.
"I call dibs on being David Hasselhoff."
"Hold up," interjected Marcus, his dark skin glistening with sunscreen. He adjusted his green board shorts and fixed Caden with a skeptical look.
"Who's going to be Pamela Anderson, then?"
All eyes turned to Caden, who held up his hands in mock surrender.
All right. I'll take one for the team. I'll be Pamela."
The group whooped and cheered, slapping Caden on the back and already starting to plan the details of their prank. As they dispersed to gather supplies and costumes, Caden felt a mix of excitement and nervousness flutter in his stomach. He'd always been the life of the party, the one to suggest outrageous ideas, but this felt different somehow. Hours later, after a flurry of activity that involved raiding thrift stores, borrowing wigs, and improvising with whatever they could find, the group reconvened on a secluded part of the beach. The sun was lower in the sky now, casting a warm, golden glow over everything. Caden emerged from behind a changing screen, and his friend's jaws dropped. He wore a red one-piece swimsuit that hugged his body in all the right places, paired with flesh-colored pantyhose to give the illusion of smooth, feminine legs. A long blonde wig cascaded down his shoulders, and he'd even managed to stuff the swimsuit to give himself an impressive bust.
"Holy smokes, Cade!"
Ethan exclaimed, his eyes wide.
"You look amazing."
Olivia circled around Caden, nodding approvingly. She was dressed in red swim trunks and a white tank top, her hair tucked under a blonde wig, styled in a very Hasselhoff-esque manner. "Seriously? You make a stunning woman. If I didn't know better, I'd think you were born for this role." Caden felt a blush creep up his cheeks, surprised by how much he enjoyed the compliments. He'd expected to feel awkward or silly, but instead, he felt empowered, confident, even. He struck a pose, one hand on his hip, and flipped his blonde locks over his shoulder.
"Well, darlings,"
he said in an exaggerated feminine voice,
"shall we give these beachgoers a show they'll never forget?"
The group positioned themselves along the shoreline, trying to stifle their giggles as they prepared for their performance. Caden stood at the front, heart pounding with a mixture of nerves and excitement. As soon as Marcus hit play on the portable speaker, the iconic Baywatch theme song filled the air. Caden took a deep breath and began to run. He focused on making his movements as graceful and feminine as possible, exaggerating the sway of his hips and the bounce of his fake bust. His friends followed behind, each playing their part to perfection. As they ran in slow motion along the beach, heads began to turn. At first, there were looks of confusion, then recognition, and finally, uproarious laughter. Beachgoers pulled out their phones to record the spectacle, cheering and clapping as the group passed by. Caden felt a rush of exhilaration, the wind in his hair, wig, the warmth of the sun on his skin, the sound of laughter and applause. It was intoxicating. For those few minutes, he wasn't just Caden anymore. He was Paloma, the stunning lifeguard, confident and beautiful. As they reached the end of their run, Caden turned to face the crowd that had gathered. Without missing a beat, he struck a pose, one hand shielding his eyes as he gazed out at the ocean. The crowd went wild, and Caden felt a surge of pride. "That was incredible!" Olivia shouted over the applause, giving Caden a high five. "You totally stole the show, Cade. Or should I say, Paloma." Caden laughed, but something about the name resonated with him. Paloma. He liked how it sounded, how it felt. As the excitement died down and the crowd dispersed, Caden's friends gathered around him, still buzzing from the performance.
"I've got to hand it to you, Caden,"
Marcus said, shaking his head in amazement.
"You really committed to the bit. How'd you learn to move like that?"
Caden shrugged, a little embarrassed.
"I don't know. It just felt natural, I guess."
Ethan clapped him on the shoulder.
"Well, whatever it was, you've got a talent, my friend. Have you ever thought about acting?"
The question caught Caden off guard. Acting. He'd never really considered it before. Sure, he'd always been the class clown, the one who could do spot-on impressions of teachers and celebrities, but actual acting? That was a whole different ballgame. As the sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow across the beach, the group decided to head to a nearby beachside bar to celebrate their successful prank. Caden hesitated, looking down at his outfit.
"Maybe I should change first,"
he said, suddenly feeling self-conscious. Olivia waved her hand dismissively. "Are you kidding? You look fabulous. Besides, it's California. No one will bat an eye." Surprised by his own willingness to go along with it, Caden found himself nodding.
"All right, but if anyone asks, I lost a bet."
The bar was bustling with activity, filled with a mix of locals and tourists enjoying the evening. As Caden and his friends entered, there were a few double takes and curious glances, but overall, people seemed more amused than shocked. They found a table in the corner, and Ethan went to get the first round of drinks. As Caden settled into his seat, he couldn't help but notice how different it felt to sit while wearing the one-piece swimsuit. He was acutely aware of the way the fabric hugged his body, how the pantyhose made his legs feel smooth and silky.
"So, Paloma,"
Marcus said with a grin, leaning across the table.
"How does it feel to be the belle of the ball?"
Caden laughed, but there was a hint of something else in his voice. Uncertainty, perhaps, or a touch of vulnerability. "It's different, but not in a bad way, you know?" Olivia nodded encouragingly. "I get it. It's like you're seeing yourself through a whole new lens. It can be pretty eye-opening. As they sipped their drinks and chatted, Caden found himself relaxing into his new persona. He caught himself unconsciously mimicking the mannerisms of the women around him, the way they crossed their legs, how they gestured while speaking, the slight tilt of the head when listening intently. A few people approached their table, complimenting them on their beach performance and asking to take photos. Caden, much to his own surprise, found himself enjoying the attention. He posed for pictures, laughing and joking with strangers as if he'd been doing this his whole life. As the night wore on, Caden excused himself to use the restroom. Standing in front of the mirror in the men's room, he took a moment to really look at himself. The blonde wig framed his face softly, and the minimal makeup he'd applied earlier in the day had somehow held up, accentuating his features in a flattering way. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to imagine what it would be like if this wasn't just a prank, if Paloma was real. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. When he returned to the table, Ethan was in the middle of a heated discussion about career changes. "I'm telling you," he said, gesturing emphatically with his beer bottle. "It's never too late to switch gears and try something new." "Speaking of which," Olivia chimed in, turning to Caden, "we were just talking about your hidden acting talents. Have you given any more thought to what I said earlier?" Caden hesitated, twirling a strand of the blonde wig around his finger. "I don't know, guys. It was just a silly prank."
But you were so natural out there,
Marcus insisted.
and look at you now. You're totally rocking this whole Paloma persona. I bet you could really do something with that.
The seed of an idea began to take root in Caden's mind. He'd always loved making people laugh, bringing joy to others. And today, being Paloma, he'd felt a sense of freedom and self-expression he'd never experienced before.
You know what?
Caden said, sitting up straighter and squaring his shoulders.
Maybe you're right. Maybe this is something worth exploring.
The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Caden, inspired by his experience as Paloma, threw himself into researching acting classes and auditioning opportunities. He started with small community theater productions, surprising himself with how quickly he took to the stage. But it wasn't just acting that captivated him. Caden found himself drawn to the world of fashion and makeup as well. He spent hours watching tutorials online, practicing different techniques, and experimenting with styles. What had started as a prank was rapidly evolving into a passion. One sunny afternoon, about a month after the Baywatch incident, Caden stood in front of his bedroom mirror, carefully applying mascara. He wore a flowing sundress in a soft peach color that complemented his skin tone perfectly. The blonde wig, now styled into gentle waves, framed his face beautifully. A knock at the door startled him, causing him to smudge the mascara slightly. "Come in," he called out, quickly grabbing a tissue to fix the mistake. Olivia poked her head in, her eyes widening as she took in Caden's appearance. "Wow, Cade, you look incredible." Caden smiled, a mix of pride and nervousness evident in his expression.
"Thanks. I've got that audition today, remember? For the indie film?"
Olivia nodded, stepping fully into the room. She was dressed casually in jeans and a green t-shirt, her brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. "How are you feeling about it?" Caden took a deep breath, smoothing down the front of his dress.
"Nervous, excited, terrified. All of the above?"
Olivia laughed, giving his arm a reassuring squeeze. "You're going to do great. You've been working so hard for this." And he had been. Over the past month, Caden had thrown himself into honing his craft. He'd taken acting classes, voice lessons, and even worked with a movement coach to perfect his feminine mannerisms. It had been challenging, often frustrating, but also incredibly rewarding.
"What if they don't buy it?"
Caden asked, voicing the fear that had been nagging at him. "What if they see right through me?" Olivia shook her head firmly. "They won't. Because when you're Paloma, you're not pretending. It's like you become her. It's honestly kind of amazing to watch." Caden felt a warmth spread through his chest at Olivia's words. She'd been his biggest supporter throughout this journey, always there with encouragement and honest feedback.
"Thanks, Liv," he said softly. "I don't know what I'd do without you."
Olivia grinned, giving him a playful punch on the arm. "Probably still be running around in red swim trunks. Now come on, let's get you to that audition." The drive to the audition location was a blur of nervous energy and last-minute line revisions. Caden, or rather Paloma, stepped out of the car, smoothing down her dress and taking a deep, centering breath. "Break a leg!" Olivia called out as Paloma walked towards the building. "You've got this!" The waiting room was filled with other hopeful actresses, all vying for the same role. Paloma took a seat, crossing her legs demurely and trying to project an air of confidence she didn't entirely feel. She couldn't help but notice the curious glances from some of the other women, but she held her head high, reminding herself that she had every right to be there.
"Paloma Anderson?"
a voice called out. It was time. As she stood up, Paloma caught a glimpse of herself in a nearby mirror. For a moment, she barely recognized the person staring back at her. Gone was the uncertain Caden, replaced by a poised, elegant woman ready to take on the world. She stepped into the audition room, heart pounding but voice steady as she introduced herself to the casting directors. As she began her monologue, something magical happened. The nerves melted away, and Paloma lost herself in the character. The words flowed naturally, her gestures and expressions perfectly capturing the essence of the role. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before one of the directors spoke.
"That was remarkable, Ms. Anderson. Truly captivating. We'll be in touch very soon."
Paloma left the audition room in a daze, her mind reeling from the experience. Had it really gone as well as she thought, or was she just riding the high of adrenaline? Olivia was waiting in the car, practically bouncing with anticipation. "Well, how did it go?" Paloma slid into the passenger seat, a slow smile spreading across her face. I think it went really well." As they drove home, Paloma filled Olivia in on the details of the audition. With each recounted moment, her excitement grew. This wasn't just a whim anymore, or a prank taken too far. This was something she truly loved, something she could see herself pursuing seriously. Over the next few days, Paloma threw herself into more auditions, each one building her confidence and honing her skills. She started to make connections in the local theater and film community, slowly but surely carving out a place for herself. It was a week after her first big audition when the call came. Paloma had just finished a yoga session, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing leggings and a loose tank top. When she saw the number on her phone, her heart leapt into her throat. "Hello?" she answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Is this Paloma Anderson? This is Richard from Blue Sky Productions. We'd like to offer you the role." The world seemed to stop for a moment. Paloma's free hand flew to her mouth, tears of joy springing to her eyes. Yes, yes, thank you so much. I'm honored, truly. After hanging up, Paloma stood in stunned silence for a moment before letting out a joyous whoop. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Filming the indie movie was an intense but incredibly rewarding experience. Paloma threw herself into the role, working tirelessly to bring her character to life. Her co-stars and the crew were welcoming and supportive, quickly becoming like a second family. As the film progressed, Paloma found herself falling more and more in love with acting. The ability to step into someone else's shoes, to tell stories that could move and inspire others, it was intoxicating. And through it all, she was discovering new facets of herself, exploring aspects of her identity she'd never even known existed. The line between Caden and Paloma began to blur. Even when she wasn't on set or at auditions, Paloma found herself gravitating towards more feminine clothing and mannerisms. It felt natural, comfortable, in a way she'd never experienced before. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of filming, Paloma sat in her dressing room, slowly removing her makeup. As she wiped away the layers of foundation and eyeshadow, she found herself staring at her reflection, lost in thought. Who was she, really? Was Paloma just a character she played, or was she becoming something more? The questions swirled in her mind, both exciting and terrifying. A knock at the door jolted her from her reverie. "Come in!" she called out. Olivia entered, carrying 2 cups of steaming coffee. She'd been a constant presence throughout the filming process, offering support and a listening ear whenever Paloma needed it. "Thought you could use a pick-me-up," Olivia said, handing Paloma one of the cups. "You were amazing out there today, by the way." Paloma smiled gratefully, taking a sip of the coffee. "Thanks, Liv. I don't know what I'd do without you." Olivia settled into a chair next to Paloma, studying her friend's face. "You seem pensive. Everything okay?" Paloma sighed, setting down her coffee cup. "I've just been thinking about all of this, about who I am, who I'm becoming." Olivia nodded encouragingly, sensing the weight of the moment. "And what have you been thinking?" "I think..." Paloma paused, taking a deep breath. "I think Paloma isn't just a character anymore. I think this is who I am, who I've always been, maybe, without realizing it." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Olivia reached out, taking Paloma's hand in hers. "If that's how you feel, then that's who you are, and I'm here for you, no matter what." Tears welled up in Paloma's eyes, a mixture of relief and gratitude washing over her. "You have no idea how much that means to me." The 2 friends sat in comfortable silence for a while, the unspoken support between them stronger than ever. As the weeks passed, Paloma began to embrace her identity more fully. She started hormone therapy, consulted with doctors about potential surgeries, and legally changed her name. It was a challenging process, filled with ups and downs, but she faced each obstacle with determination and grace. The film wrapped, and soon it was time for the premiere. Paloma stood on the red carpet, resplendent in a shimmering gold gown that hugged her curves. Her blonde hair was styled in elegant waves, and her makeup was flawless. As cameras flashed and reporters called out questions, she felt a sense of pride and accomplishment, unlike anything she'd ever experienced. This was her moment, the culmination of a journey that had begun with a simple beach prank and led to a complete transformation, not just of her outward appearance, but of her very sense of self. As she posed for photos and gave interviews, Paloma caught sight of her friends in the crowd. Olivia, Ethan, and Marcus were all there, cheering her on. Their unwavering support had been a cornerstone of her journey, and seeing them there, celebrating her success, filled her heart with joy. Later that night, as the after-party wound down, Paloma found a quiet moment to slip away. She stood on a balcony overlooking the city, the cool night air a welcome respite from the crowded party inside. As she gazed out at the twinkling lights of Los Angeles, Paloma reflected on the incredible path that had led her here. From Caden, the fun-loving prankster, to Paloma, the rising starlet, it had been a transformation beyond anything she could have imagined. But more than the fame or the accolades, what mattered most was that she had found herself. In becoming Paloma, she had discovered a truth about herself that had always been there, waiting to be uncovered. A soft voice behind her broke through her thoughts. "There you are," Olivia said, joining her on the balcony. "Quite a night, huh?" Paloma turned, smiling at her friend.
It's been incredible. Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life.
Olivia leaned against the railing, bumping Paloma's shoulder playfully. "Well, believe it. You've worked hard for this, and you deserve every bit of success." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the distant sounds of the party drifting out to them. "You know," Paloma said finally, "I keep thinking about that day on the beach, how different things might have been if we hadn't decided to do that silly Baywatch prank." Olivia laughed softly. Who knew a red swimsuit could change someone's life so dramatically? Paloma joined in the laughter, shaking her head in amazement. "Life's funny that way, I guess. You never know what small moment might lead to something bigger." As they stood there, looking out over the city, Paloma felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. The journey hadn't been easy, and she knew there would be more challenges ahead. But she was ready to face them, secure in who she was and surrounded by people who loved and supported her. From a beach prank to a red carpet premiere, from Caden to Paloma, it had been an extraordinary transformation. But in the end, it was simply the story of someone finding the courage to be their true self. As the night wore on and the party began to wind down, Paloma found herself surrounded by her closest friends and supporters. They gathered in a quiet corner of the venue, away from the prying eyes of the paparazzi and industry bigwigs. Ethan raised his glass, his eyes twinkling with pride.
"To Paloma,"
he said, his voice filled with warmth,
"who showed us all the power of embracing who you truly are."
The group clinked their glasses together, echoing the toast. Paloma felt a lump form in her throat, overcome with emotion. "I couldn't have done any of this without you all," she said, her voice thick with gratitude. "You've been my rock through all of this." Marcus grinned, throwing an arm around her shoulders. "Are you kidding? We're the lucky ones. We got front row seats to the most amazing transformation story ever." As they laughed and reminisced about the journey that had brought them to this point, Paloma couldn't help but marvel at how far she'd come. From the nervous guy in a blonde wig and red swimsuit to the confident woman she was today, it was a journey she never could have predicted, but one she wouldn't change for the world. The night eventually came to an end, And as Paloma made her way home, she felt a sense of excitement for what the future might hold. Her career was taking off. She had found her true self, and she was surrounded by love and support. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Paloma's last thoughts were of that sunny day on the beach, where a simple prank had set in motion a series of events that would change her life forever. She silently thanked that version of herself, the Caden who had been brave enough to put on that red swimsuit and take the first step on this incredible journey. In the years that followed, Paloma's star continued to rise. She took on challenging roles, pushing the boundaries of her craft and using her platform to advocate for transgender rights and representation in the entertainment industry. The beach prank that had started it all became a beloved anecdote, a story she shared in interviews to inspire others to embrace their authentic selves. And through it all, she never forgot the lessons she'd learned along the way, that sometimes the biggest changes come from the smallest moments, that true friends will stand by you no matter what, and that the greatest role you can play is simply being yourself. As Paloma's career flourished, she often found herself returning to that same beach where it all began. Standing there, feeling the sand between her toes and the sun on her face, she would smile to herself, grateful for the journey that had brought her home to herself.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!